just in terms of the cohort of attendees today, we've got a real mixture, fascinating mixture today. A number of our colleagues from our local authority areas who are already launched 50 Things, who've already become 50 Things areas, or they're about to launch, working with 17 local authorities across the UK now. Or there's some other local authority areas who are wanting to find out a little bit more about 50 Things to Do Before You're 5, you know, and to gain greater insight. They may be interested in becoming a 50 Things local organisation, a 50 Things local authority themselves. And then we've got a scattering of early years practitioners and people with leadership responsibilities in the private voluntary and independent sector, within nursery schools, or within primary schools as well. Whoever you are, whatever your reason for coming here this afternoon, you're very welcome. Okay, so to start things off, I'm going to give you just a little bit more detail about 50 Things, what it is, what it stands for, what we're trying to achieve. My name is Chris Bunting. I'm director of Bradford Birth to 19, and we're the organisation which is behind 50 Things to Do Before You're 5. Although in truth, it's a partnership product. It's a result of conversations and work in progress with us and our local authority friends across the country. It's not an initiative that was created once and stands still. We continue to learn about what's important, what works, what's effective for children and families of the under 5s. This afternoon, I'm really grateful colleagues supporting me here. We've got Anita Grant from Play England, chair of Play England, who's joining us this afternoon to talk about Summer of Play, fantastic, high-profile initiative, and I suppose rallying call for the value of play, particularly as during that COVID recovery period. We've got Professor John Wright, research director at the Bradford Institute of Health Research, who's also supports the Born in Bradford initiative and the Centre for Applied Educational Research. Really great to see John here this afternoon. And we've got our very own Rachel Dennis. He's our 50 Things to Do Before You're 5 project worker in Bradford. 3 really highly impressive individuals who've given their time to us this afternoon, and I'm really grateful that they've agreed to support us. So 50 Things to Do Before You're 5, a few words about this before we start this afternoon. It's based on 50 Things to Do Before You're 5. It's based on practice at St Edmund's Nursery School. It's a nursery school in the centre of Bradford, serving a children community, a children and parent community, which are very significantly socioeconomically disadvantaged. But we're an outstanding school, and the practice that we've kind of cascaded into 50 Things to Do Before You're 5 represents the practice at the school, but it also represents the ideas of academics, of practitioners with a wide range of specialisms, speech and language, around health and physical development, and it is a combined effort, which is a celebration of outstanding practice, which has been drawn in from experts across the country. 50 Things to Do Before You're 5 provides suggestions to parents. It is deliberately directed at giving parents greater confidence and just giving them ideas of low cost, no cost activities that they can engage in with their children locally, whether it be going down to the park, playing at home. These are simple, straightforward, but highly effective ways of supporting children's early learning and I suppose setting them out on the journey to having a happy, long and healthy life. Low cost, no cost. It's really important that all the things that we suggest are really very accessible to the children that we're trying to work with. In Bradford, 50 Things to Do Before You're 5 is a universal offer, but we follow that with particularly targeted work in areas of high socioeconomic disadvantage and with cohorts of children who perhaps just need a little bit more support and a little bit more engagement with And there we are, 50 things to do before you're 5. It's a multi-platform offer. It's an app, it's a website, it is a whole range of printed resources, and it's social media campaign support, and it's local to your region. So there's a 50 things to do before you're 5 Bradford, just as much as there's a 50 things to do before you're 5 Wakefield, Sheffield, East Sussex, Southwark, and in a whole load of other areas across the country. 50 things to do before you're 5 was designed to support early health outcomes. These are a real key priority as we emerge from the COVID pandemic. It supports language development, the development of cognition and memory, mental well-being, and school readiness. And we do find those professionals within local authority areas who are interested in 50 things to do before you're 5 comes from a range of areas, some of them with a public health interest, some of them very much with a health interest from the CCG or from the NHS, and other colleagues very much interested in learning development. And actually, for those of you who know a lot about early years, which includes those people attending here today, we know that those things, health, learning, and mental well-being, don't sit in silos in the early years. They're deeply connected. And 50 Things tries to support parents in making a difference with children in all of those areas. The best way to have get an insight into 50 things to do before you're 5 is to download the app and to have a look at it and have a look at the quality that's behind there. 50 things to do before you're 5. When you get the app, you can see that those 50 things to do before you're 5 are similar in every area, but they're also got very important local contexts, different pictures, different children, slightly different activities, different parks and museums. 50 Things to Do Before You're 5 is now rolling out nationally. It started in Bradford. It now covers all of West Yorkshire, but it's in every region of the United Kingdom, or every region of England, I should say. 17 local authorities, reaching out to more than 500,000 children, 18% of England's under 5 cohort. Those are the figures that we're looking at by the beginning or perhaps by the end of the summer. And that's a significant initiative, 50 Things to Do Before You're 5. And there's a place for every local authority within it. In terms of what you get, the local authority, that is a 50 Things to Do Before You're 5 local area, gets their own website, their own app, and there's the icon that tries to describe what the 50 Things to Do Before You're 5 app looks like on the left-hand side. And you get a range of print-ready resources. In Bradford, huge numbers of families download 50 Things to Do Before You're 5 app, but even more of them pick up that poster, which is the 5x10 poster there. 50, 5x10 is 50. That's my maths being right. The 5x10 poster there, and a lot of families use that as a kind of like a back of the kitchen door or fridge door poster, a little visual timetable for children to be able to point at and say, I want to do that today, mum and dad. 50, it's a local offer. So within your locality, you get your own website, your own app, your own marketing resources, and into those templates that we provide to you from 50 Things headquarters, you put pictures of your children, your local assets, such as the museums and the parks and the services, things that you know about, that you want to point parents to in your local area. And as well as those more formal offers like museums and galleries, also a chance for you to share local knowledge, such as great places to play poo sticks, great places to see snowdrops come out to flower in the late winter and spring. An opportunity through the app to promote local events, through app push notifications or through the event pages. And really importantly, you get the opportunity to be able to evaluate the impact that you're having. When a person signs in to the app, they put in their postcode data, they don't put their name in, but what you can do with that really rich and powerful data set is compare it against locally held data sets, your own EDACI or socioeconomic disadvantage data sets, and see the difference that you're making in the areas that are priorities to you as a local authority. So that's 50 things in a nutshell. We are super happy to explain that to you in more detail. Very happy to have one-to-one conversations with anybody who wants to find out more about 50 things to do before you're 5. We are a social enterprise. We are a not-for-profit organisation. We're doing this because it's the right thing to do, because we're trying to make a difference to children, their development, parents across the UK, and we're trying to make a difference to children growing up in poverty and to give them a better chance, as well as making an offer to all parents. We'll have an opportunity for questions at the end, but I'm going to, gives me great pleasure right now to hand it over to Anita Grant, who's chair of Play England, to talk about the Summer of Play. And I'll hand over to Anita now and stop screen sharing.
Thank you, Chris. I'm hoping that someone else is going to screen share on my behalf with some images that I've brought along. There's not any writing on them, it's just images for you to look at rather than having to look at me whilst I speak. I'm the chair of Play England currently. I'm also the CEO of Islington Play Association, and we run adventure playgrounds and a children's centre in Islington. Play England is the national body in England for play, and we work closely with Play Scotland, Play Wales and Playboard Northern Ireland to think about the whole of the UK, and that's how we developed the campaign for a Summer of Play, which is a pledge which I'll say a bit more about in a moment. Free play is what children do when no one tells them what to do. This pandemic has created an unprecedented time of restriction for children. They were literally not allowed out, not allowed to see their friends, and forced to use computers and screens for any interactions outside their immediate family. And to be honest, none of us know what the outcomes of that experience are going to be. They've been totally observed and they've been controlled. We're getting more and more research now about feelings of isolation, loneliness, sadness at missing friends from children. And there are constant stories in the news and conversations being had about a lost generation, the need to catch up, and how hard life is going to be for these children and young people. As we move into the next phase, I think we need to think about how children may not have had experiences we would have expected them to have had by now. We need to think about how we reflect on the last period of time and how we talk about it in front of our children. Even the very youngest children can hear us talk. Things like the lost generation will have impact on their knowledge, skills, and experience. And the experiences that we know that they haven't had will need to have an impact on our expectations. I've worked in the children's sector since the late 90s, and in 2000 I became the programme manager for a first wave Sure Start programme in Hackney. The premise of that programme was an identification of what was deemed wrong for families, what was going wrong for them. And my job in that programme was to develop local solutions with a multi-agency partnership. We had reams of targets for everything, from reducing teenage pregnancies to smoking cessation to attainment. We had a big budget, and alongside prescriptive and smart targets, we had a focus on play, learning and childcare. The final evaluation noted that it was difficult to work out which targets were affected by which activities, as many of them made a big difference to both parents and children, to both play and learning. How very inconvenient for the evaluation that they couldn't work out which thing cost which bits of money and what thing worked best. It was an interesting ethos to work within, and actually in those early days there was total freedom to deliver in a locally effective way, and that meant that we could try things out. As time went on, evidence-based approaches started to be introduced, and what we did changed. It was a good thing for Sure Start, but we did also lose something. Local focus became more restricted and innovation definitely reduced. Programs became a lot more homogenized as good practice was shared, and eventually the Sure Start programs became children's centres, and the focus moved to parental employment. And then, of course, virtually everything was cut apart from childcare. I've been reflecting on that original freedom that I experienced in the Sure Start programme, the ability to make decisions, to have agency, to choose what was right for the space and the time, working creatively with partners, and trying things out. Responding to where you are and who is there is what makes play so vital and important. This freedom is fundamental for play and for children. Play is intrinsically motivated. I don't know if you've really thought about that. Play is intrinsically motivated. It's done for its own sake. You definitely learn things along the way, but the learning goal is not the reason you play. Free play is what children actually do when no one tells them what to do, and it will allow them to learn the skills, resilience, and flexibility that they are ever so likely to need in our changing world. As you saw in the video at the beginning of this, children do not try to manage their experiences or their experiments. They might have an idea, try it again. You can tell them it won't work, but they won't believe you. And they haven't even decided what success looks like anyway. When their original plan doesn't work, they don't feel they have failed. They're able to enjoy the outcome that they did get from it. Adults tend to try and teach them that there are fixed outcomes and they got it wrong if they didn't achieve the goal. And that's the thing that I think it's time for us to question. In an unprecedented global pandemic, how do we know what the outcome should be? Local authorities have an amazing opportunity to really affect the experiences and lives of their youngest and most vulnerable residents. The way schools approach recovery, the use of the holiday activities and food money, and the summer of 2021 present a rare moment where what is on offer for local families will have a fundamental impact on children coming out of the pandemic lockdown. You can move the screen on if you don't mind. Local authorities can look to develop a play strategy, can think about the engagement with nature, children's access to parks, the supremacy of the car, the use of shared space in our villages, towns and cities, and how residents will interact with each other there. There are so many ways to support children and young people to recover and to improve their health and well-being. You can just keep going through the slides. There is a lot to do. What I wanted to ask is that all of you who are able to make decisions that affect children and young people, take a moment now to think back. Imagine you are 8 or 12 or 16, and imagine what this last year would have been like for you at that age. I know, right? That understanding and reflection should underpin all of our decisions. Throughout my career from Sure Start to CEO of the biggest play charity in the country and chair of Play England, I've learned that we get what we value. If we value SAT scores, SATs, we work to make children do them. If we value getting our shopping really fast and really cheap, we create online retailers. And if we value economic success, we celebrate those who make the most money. I feel that this is an ideal time to reassess what we value, and nowhere is this more important than in relation to the children. So that is why Play England is calling for a summer of play. The idea of a summer, that's the last slide, I think. The idea of the summer of play arose in conversation between Play England and Play First UK. We realised that a whole range of professionals were calling for fun, friends and freedom before catch-up lessons, tutors and an extended school day. And we wanted to amplify that call. Since we started the campaign, which has been really supported by The Guardian, that's been amazing, we've seen the conversation change and the word play being bandied about with free abandon. The summer of play calls for space and time to re-engage, experiment, try things out, change the outcomes. Time to explore our relationship with nature, time to relax, to be with friends and peers, to discuss, disagree and compromise. Time to learn how to get up when we fall, engage with our environment and allow free flow. If play is intrinsically motivated, then what will happen if we allow the space, time and freedom to see what happens when we play? Please join with us in the summer of play and take the pledge. If you could just move to the last slide, that should have the summer of play logo. It's a website. And if you go there, it explains a bit more about the campaign. You can see who else has signed up. and you can join us in the Summer of Play. Thank you very much.
I was supposed to say one question from me in there, Anita, but I think we'll just hold on to those at the end, and to see any other questions that occur within the chat. John will, I'm sure, pick on some of those themes associated with that during his presentation, and we'll hand over to him now. Thank you so much, Anita. Hi, John, and there we are.
Yeah, thanks, Anita. That was great. I'm definitely gonna join you. My kids are all grown up, but I'll be there because I think we all need a bit of summer of play, don't we? Lovely to meet you all. Thank you for inviting me. I'm a medic, so I work at Bradford Royal Infirmary, but I also run a study called Born in Bradford. And I'm a big fan on 50 Things. I think I love its simplicity, and I love its focus on early life. And I love its sort of nudges of how we change behaviors. It's very intuitive, isn't it? It's something that we all want to do. I'm very keen to support this webinar. And also in particular, because like Born in Bradford, 50 Things was born in Bradford. So we like to cluster in our successes. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the study, and then in particular about the relationship of some of the elements of 50 Things around physical activity. You know, it talks about dancing and flying a kite and riding a bike, but also green space. And it sort of plays a little bit on what Anita's been talking about. You know, that sort of links into nature, but also the physical activity. So it's a combination of factors. And while we think that this is an epidemiological study, it's a longitudinal prospective epidemiological study. So we think very much as scientists, as isolated exposures, but this is about multiple things that interact, that change our lifestyles. So we set up, is that not working? Yep. We set up the study in 2007, and we recruited about 14,000 families. So we've got about 30,000 mums, dads, and children. The dads were the hardest to reach, as always. And the aim of the study was to describe the health and ill health in the city, which has some of the lowest healthy life expectancy in the UK, some of the highest rates of physical and mental ill health, very much related to inequalities. To use that evidence to design interventions to do something about it, and see how we could integrate research into practice. This is very much about how we, you know, just as we've shown over the pandemic, how science and research can change policy and practice. We felt this is something also important about non-communicable disease and about other aspects of health. We wanted to build research capacity in the city as well. So our children are, the oldest ones are just turned 14 actually. So they're from about 11 to 14. So entering this age of wonder, this adolescent period, we're hoping to follow them up over the next 6-7 years to see how they get on during this tumultuous phase of biological and social and emotional development as they metamorphosize from children to adults. But the environment has been a key part of this. So while these children here, they're leaping with joy because of the success that they've had in changing science around the world, everything from diabetes to cot death to renal disease to vision health. But the environment has been a key part of our science. And it goes back to some of the original papers that we published in the Lancet. This is about air pollution and pregnancy. This is a very pivotal paper showing the harm of air pollution from particulate matter, 2.5. This is small particles, not like pollen or dust. This comes in particular from diesel engines. And the smaller the particles that we breathe in from our air pollution, the deeper it goes into our bodies. And it also tends to be the most toxic, things like heavy metals and organic pollutants. So this is nasty stuff, and it's all around us. And we show this very clear link to low birth weight, which is a really important marker of both child and adult health, but also head circumference. You know, this is affecting our brain development. So this is stuff that's going on around us all the time. It's a tragedy of the commons. As the children have grown up, we've shown this very strong link to asthma. 25% of asthma in the city, as in other cities, is related to traffic-related air pollution. We've even shown at a molecular level, when you look at the strands of DNA on your chromosomes, you can show these are like little biological clocks. The closer to polluting roads that you live, the shorter your biological clock. These are in children. This is a marker of how long they're going to live. And green space, we found this very strong link between green space and pregnancy and positive mental health. As the children grow up, the closer they live to green space, the better they do at school. Even birth weight seems to be affected by this. And there's lots of reasons why this may be. It may be that there's less air pollution around if you live near a park, for example. It may be that you exercise more if you live near a green space. It may be that you meet people in the park and have social interactions which are positive. It may even be something very much more primeval, something evolutionary that we need to be back in nature to restore our health. And one of the things that we've grown and we've evolved over time is this recognition that we're not looking at isolated exposures. We think now, we think in terms of the exposure, multiple factors that affect us from the environment, whether that's ultraviolet light, whether it's green space, whether it's air pollution, whether it's dietary factors such as organic pesticides or heavy metals in our diet. These are all environmental exposures, and they're not isolated, they're not disconnected, they all interact. And the green space and the air pollution, the ultraviolet and the diet as well. So trying to think of this as a whole. So over the last year, our children and young people have been growing up, as Anita says, in one of the hardest periods to grow up as children ever, probably. And we've been, the cohort has allowed us this very strong link into our community to find out what's going on. And again, as Anita pointed out about the effects of mental health, we can think about the effects of mental health in particular for these children around the immediate lockdown, the longer term pandemic over the following year, how we support children through access to services, but also then the long-term consequences, and in particular related to austerity. So just before the lockdown began, we'd finished this latest study looking at vulnerability of children. 16,000 primary school children took part in this. And some this is just before lockdown, so some very powerful figures here in our city. Something like 20% had no access to the internet. This is they're just about to go on a year on remote learning, and yet they didn't have access to the internet. Some of them were using their parents' phones to do their schoolwork. 13% didn't have access to any garden, and 30% didn't live near a park. I'll come back to this social patterning of these risk factors. In terms of mental health, you can also see the big bar here is the bullying. 50% of our children report bullying, 30% saying that they're keeping the worries to themselves, and another 25% concerned about the finances in the family. This is real. This is the leveling down agenda. This is the inequalities at play affecting our children. Then we looked at the mental health of the parents, and you can also see these very clear gradients. PHQ and GAD-7 are markers, the validated markers of anxiety and depression. So they're used quite commonly, quite simple tools, but they give good indicators. And you can see if you're comfortably off, if your children live near have a garden, live near the park, who can do their online work at school, then actually for some people, the lockdowns have been quite a positive experience, spending more time with the family, that sort of thing. But for most of our families in Bradford, it's not been. This has been a time of great anxiety and depression. That legacy is something that we have to live with. So moving on from the mental health to the physical, we also asked our children about their physical activity, and we've been monitoring about 1,000 of them using accelerometers, which are sort of wristbands or waistbands that measure your physical activity, much as you have on your phone actually, but more sophisticated. And we found that about 70% of our children were meeting national guidance before COVID, but that's dropped quite dramatically to about 30%, dropped by about half with the with lockdowns. And you can see how this is ethnically patterned. So for our white British kids, the drop wasn't so much, 35%, but it went down to about 25% in our children of Pakistani heritage. About half our children of white European extraction, about half are of South Asian extraction. And then when you look at how people report leaving the home, you can see also this how patterned it is by ethnicity. And in particular, South Asian families and children of South Asian families being worried about leaving the house. And that's not just about the environment of the house, being noisy, traffic-filled roads without any green space, but it's also fear of the virus and fear of sending children out where you have vulnerable grandparents living at home. And this is important because we notice, and we've shown in Born in Bradford, you have these very strong differences in adiposity or fat tissue in children. So South Asian kids tend to be born smaller, about 300 grams smaller, but with higher levels of obesity, adiposity, about 30% higher. So by the time they're 9, we've just done DEXA scans on our 9-year-olds. This difference is about 2 kilograms of fat tissue. And you can see this played out again in how unequal it is across the most deprived and least deprived children. The more deprived you are, the greater the risk of obesity. And this is a consequence of that physical activity, of the environment, of the factors that are affecting COVID. So how do you deal with this? How do we get a bit despondent about this? It's important to have the science to understand what's happening here. But it's also important that we develop solutions. So at a personal level, I don't use pesticides anymore because we found that pesticides that were banned 30 years ago, we can still detect in our children's blood. I sold my car about 8 years ago when the evidence about the harms of air pollution was so overwhelming from Born in Bradford. And I berate my colleagues at the hospital that they're probably doing more harm driving their BMW diesel cars into work through our inner city suburbs from the green leafy suburbs each day than they are as doctors. But those are small things that we could do in an individual level. We need to think bigger about systems. And one of the things we're trying to do in Bradford, as we are in Tower Hamlets, this is a London-Yorkshire link, is to think about how we can think about whole systems. This isn't about working in isolation. It's about how we work interactively. And that involves schools, it involves our built environment, urban design, transport, arts and culture, but also play and physical activity. So I'm very keen to think about how we could work a little bit more closely with Play England. Never mind the rest of the people watching here, Anita. Let's see what we can do across Tower Hamlets and Yorkshire to see whether we can have programs of play, but also using our cohorts, see what the positive benefits of physical and mental health are. So thank you very much for listening. I'm happy to answer any questions.
And again, I think we'll do. Thank you so much, John. It's really deeply fascinating stuff. I work closely with the team at the Bradford Institute for Health Research and the Centre for Applied Education Research, and that's just some remarkable stuff going on in Bradford. And we're cascading learning from that into the 50 Things to Do Before You're 5 initiative. So that we can stay even slightly to schedule, I'm going to hand over directly to Rachel Dennis, our 50 Things to Do Before You're 5 project worker in Bradford, to talk about some of the work that she's doing in the city and in the district. Rachel.
Hello, everybody. So I'm Rachel Dennis. I'm the project officer for 50 Things to Do Before You're 5 in Bradford. I've been an enthusiast with the project since its launch in 2018, and I've been a project officer since November last year. So I'm going to be talking to you about building the social skills through cultural partnerships. So culture in Bradford, it is many, many things. It is the UK's largest city. It's also one of the youngest in Europe, and it's one of the most diverse in the UK. We're lucky enough to have many, many museums, galleries, theatres, bandstands, canals, buses, steam trains, everything big and small, and a really rich cultural heritage. And part of the work that I've been doing is working how we can make it so that everybody feels welcome in these spaces. Bradford is actually putting a bid in for the UK City of Culture, And as part of that, we have backed 2 of the aims. So we will help Bradford to know itself better. So for us, that involves encouraging families with children under the age of 5 to explore the district's heritage, to promote Bradford's museums, libraries and open spaces, to encourage visits to the canals and bridges and theatres, to provide information to promote and offer events and experiences that help children to better understand the historically rich district and all its abundance. And we're hoping to reach many, many children and families. Another bit is to create an explosion of opportunity. So we will continue to work with families, schools and partners. We will support them to explore the creativity and acknowledge their efforts are valid, so that young children and families have the opportunity to explore their abilities and continue in a path towards working in the arts. But also by reaching the families of children under 5, we will not only validate and encourage creativity in the district's youngest communities, but it's also about that supporting the parents for the confidence in their own skills and talents. So we're empowering the parents about that importance of the play. One of the things that we've just recently started is a project called Walk, Talk, Discover and Draw. And this is in collaboration with Bradford Museums and Galleries and also Bradford District Parks. So we've been working across 4 sites, Cliff Castle, Museum and Park, Lister Park and Cartwright Hall, Bolin Hall and Bowling Park, and then we'll be doing Bradford Industrial Museum. So I've just got some little bits from the sessions that we've been doing at Cliff Castle, so you can have a bit of insight into how that's been working. We start with each one, we meet at the entrance of the museum that's in that area. We're working with small groups, and the idea is that we're introducing them back to the area. They may have come to the park to go to the play area but never been in the museum. But also we're finding we're getting a lot of 2-year-olds, so they've not been out in a year, they've not seen many people. So we're doing these small groups, the meeting, they get an introduction, a really good resource pack with a handmade sketchbook, a poster, and then we kind of let them take the lead. So they'll decide where they're going to go. Initially, we'll walk around the outside of the building and we're asking them what they can see, getting them to show us what's interesting to them. We found we've had parents that either have had twins, they might have come because they've not been able to go anywhere on their own with them. So they're quite enjoying having some extra hands about. For the second session, we'll then do a quick recap and we might go to a different part of the area. So these ones at Cliff Castle, we went down to the fountains. We introduced more resources. So we had big rolls of paper, the children were able to sketch. But we had a small little girl, she's 2. Her parents were quite concerned because she'd not been anywhere for over a year, just seen her older sister and her grandma only recently. So she was very, very nervous and wary around strangers. The first part of the session, she just hid behind mum's legs. But by the end, she was like, I want to go see the blossom. That's a picture of her there, dragging a blossom along. And at the end, when we said bye to her, we said, what's your name? And she said, I'm Blossom. Session 3 at Cliff Castle, we were able to get access to a stone tunnel. So it's a hidden gem for them because this was somewhere that they wouldn't usually be able to get access to. We did lots of chalking, playing with light. We discovered a secret bird's nest. And we allowed the children to roll they chose to roll a big roll of green paper all the way down a slope. And then they stamped on it, they drew on it. And we found that even though you'd say to the parents, look, we give parents and children a sketchbook for them to use, they will go, oh no, I'm all right, I'll just watch. And then you'll turn around and the adults are drawing pictures on the walls, they're tying ribbons, they're making models out of sticks. You'll see in the bottom left picture there, like the adult was drawing with the chalk and the children were squirting it off. So it's really, really interactive, but not scripted that way. We just let them do. We throw lots of things out and they can just choose. After the 3 sessions outside, the aim then is to go inside the museum because they're familiar with the space, they're familiar with the group. We get different people will come each week. Some people come every week, some people just come a few of the weeks. So for the 4th session, we go into the museum. This 3rd session that we'd done, we had let them know that we would be going into the museum next week. and that we would visit the bees, because at Cliff Castle they have a beehive, so you can go upstairs and see it. This is was really exciting for us the next week when we turned up and one of the children was dressed as a bee in preparation for going into the museum. So they decided they were definitely dressing up. She had bee leggings, bee outfit, and they were so excited. They ran down the hill. We'd only met them 3 times. This was the 3rd time because one of the sessions they couldn't make it. They were going, bees, bees, bees. We're going inside. They didn't want to do outside. So we were fine with that. But they did do a little bit of chalking, and they went round. Their parents were in smaller groups. They talked to some of the other members of the group also. And you can see they were stopping to look at things together. They were all holding on to a notebook and sketchbook and drawing together, and just exploring all the different bits, asking questions, pointing at things. But we found that some people had been to the play areas but not been inside the museum. They thought it wasn't appropriate for children, or it wouldn't be safe. So by building that relationship with them prior and allowing them to build relationship with other people in the group, it made it much more comfortable for them to revisit the site. Another thing that happened with each session, we took photos of the drawings they'd done, and the museums and galleries displayed that in their windows. So if they did come back to the park throughout the week, they could see their own artwork on display. So especially for this last session, once we were in the museum, they kind of had their own exhibit, so it made it so it felt like it was their own. We've got lots of exciting things planned in Bradford over the summer, and yeah, we're hoping to have lots of activities as part of the summer of play. So we're working with Bradford Libraries. We'll be doing some pop-up play sessions and rhyme sessions once we're allowed to sing again. We've been working with the Bradford Literacy Trust on many activities too, and we've also been involved with some of the HAF projects at Windle Community Centre, Cafe West and Bradford New Church. So you can see there last week we did a Hungry Caterpillar picnic, which was very much fun, and we allowed them to try all the different types of food. We had music and of course bubbles, and we're really excited to be working with Northern Rail, hopefully providing some trips near and far for our different users. With the use of the app, we've really benefited from the events tab, because it means we can add the events that we're doing. People can see where they'll find us. So over the next few weeks, you'll see lots more events being added onto there. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Rachel. Come back to me. I wonder, I'll just pick up some of a couple of questions there, some engagement from some of colleagues here today about Rachel's lovely projects that she's running and the cost of it, and they've all been answered in the chat. There's an awful lot that you can do for free. Loads of people wanting to work in initiatives like this who are representing their own organizations. Loads of museums and galleries want to do stuff in this space. Typically these things are free, or there are ways to make them free. We've been really lucky to be funded locally through some funding from the Bradford Council, and also from money from Shine Trust in Leeds as well. Okay, I'm just picking up a couple of questions. I think if John and Anita are still here, I know they've both had other meetings to go to. Other people can pick up some of those questions in the chat. I've got one from me to John. John, are you still here? Just checking you are. Yeah, you are, John.
Yes, I'm going to have to go, Chris. So, but go on.
It's one question.
If I can answer. If you can ask it.
Very straightforward question. As an epidemiologist, is all this stuff that you're doing in the primary age phase and secondary age phase too late? Shouldn't everything be done in the early years? Aren't the behaviours and health patterns established in a way that's very difficult to break free from by the time you get to becoming an older person?
Yeah, it depends what you're looking at. I think, if we're looking at cardiometabolic health, for example, we've gone further and further back, actually, not just to birth, but to pregnancy and then pre-pregnancy. So everything is this cycle that the earlier you act, the better, which is why we called our program Act Early. And And I think undoubtedly the early years are really key, a critical period. But our children are entering adolescence as well, and that's another very crucial period as well, you know, in terms of change. So I think there's different phases, but definitely the first few years and adolescence would be my priorities.
Thanks, John. I'll allow you to go to your next thing. Thank you so much for helping us out this afternoon. Question for Anita. Anita, are you here?
I am here, yeah.
Summer of Play, fantastic Guardian coverage there. I was deeply impressed with it. In double page spreads. It's not a little articles squirreled away into the Guardian 2 section over it is. These are really big front page kind of like teaser headlines and then double page spread. Anybody listening in the government? Is anybody paying attention to what you're saying? They should do. I'm just wondering if anybody listens.
I think as you've pointed out, the Guardian coverage has really helped. And yes, I've had a couple of meetings with DFE. And in fact, that's my next meeting that I'm rushing off to. So there has been conversations. And the thing that I liked the most about the conversation I had last time was that the person I was speaking to hadn't thought about the difference between play and activities. And it's not until you get people to start thinking about their own childhood, really, their own sense of what they remember themselves, that they really remember what the difference is between play and activities. And so we are having conversations about the healthy activities and food programme and the way that things are spoken about across the whole board. And who knows, I think that there's a lot of interest from officers, and there's a slightly different approach from ministers.
Yes. Okay. If there's any other questions, please just throw them into the chat. I'm going to close in a couple of minutes, but if you've got anything else, anything to ask of us, that's fine. Just as a recap, whilst people are having a think, we will be holding 2 further webinars in the autumn term, and we'll be inviting to anybody who's registered for these events automatically to them. But recordings of today's event will be on the 50 Things to Do Before You're 5 website and on the webinar page from that. Anybody's interested in just having a further one-to-one conversation, perhaps from a local authority area that's come along today for the first time, or maybe you've come along to 1 or 2 other webinars and would like just a one-to-one conversation. There's no promises from your side. Just get in contact with us and we'll gladly put half an hour aside. Half an hour aside to anybody who wants to have a chat. Our ambition, bold, courageous and brave, I hope, is that every child in England and in the UK will have the opportunity to do 50 Things to Do Before You're 5, whether or not it's through what we offer or whether or not it's through other local versions. It's something that we're committed to. We think it's the right thing to do, and it's having an impact in the areas that we're working. I don't think that there are any questions that are rising through the chat other than the ones that we've been answered directly. Andrea, do you want to just come onto screen? If you can bring Andrea on, is our national lead for 50 Things to Do Before You're 5. Ready and willing, keen to speak to anybody. A few words from you.
I just want to say how absolutely fascinating that piece of video was that Anita showed. I think all the play and learning that could be demonstrated with that tiny clip. We were talking about videoing some children and perhaps using examples to share with parents and point out exactly what those children are learning. If that's anything that you have consent to share more widely, Anita, we would love to use that as part of that project.
I only need to ask my 13-year-old son, because it is a video of him at the age of about 4. So I'll check with him.
Yes, please do. We've actually got older children and some of their younger photographs on our poster in Bradford, and we have to go back every 2 years and say, you're 13 now, is this still all right? So thank you for that, Anita. It was very beautiful. Now, what a fascinating programme this afternoon, Chris. I just thought the breadth demonstrating the real need for free play in its truest form over the summer. And I think your comment about Kevin Collins is very valid, but my understanding was that, you know, whilst it was very worthy and re-engaging with sport, music and the rich range of activities provided by schools, it's not exactly free play. And I think there has to be space for the wider curriculum in any catch-up agenda, but you know my belief in play.
That organised, that's what I was thinking right up until I said, I was thinking what I enjoyed, the just freedom, that's what I wanted.
Yes, I think if you talk to anybody at all about childhood memories, the memories that really sit with you, that you can remember most vividly, are the ones where you did your own thing. Hugely important to me.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Avril.
Okay, I think we're going to call things to a close today. We'll be in touch with you about our next 50 Things to Do Before Your 5 webinar. Everybody's who's come along today, anybody who's been there previously, we're really happy to talk to anybody in the country about having your own 50 Things to Do Before Your 5. Don't normally do this in a webinar. I'm meeting with the DfE very shortly, Anita. We'll be quite interested in speaking to you before your meeting, so perhaps we can get in contact quite quickly. Brilliant to see everybody here today, and have a wonderful rest of the day. And let's looking forward.
Could I just flag up, Avril Allenby said that she's trying to secure funding. I think sometimes recordings of these webinars are really useful to share with a wider partnership brief. Please feel free to do so.
Yeah, I'm happy to give some information about how we've worked in some of our partnerships too, if that might help.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you all very much, everyone. And I'll release you to the rest of your working day, and have a good rest of the week. And best wishes for a fun, safe and happy summer of play.
And terrible jaws. I have terrible teeth. And terrible teeth.
Good, mix in, mix. Another bubble. Wow. Bubble. Mix.
Tomatoes with big elephants and big brown bear.
And what happened?
And a big brown bear.
Tell Molly.
Big brown mouse.
Wow, that was a big jump.
Shall we do something? Oh, we could splash. Put our hand in. Oh, mixing.